thank you all for coming along to this climate panel. My name is Chris Ward. I'm an Android engineering manager for NordVPN at Nord Security. And I just want to explain how this panel sort of came about. On the program committee for DroidCon, we were talking about what panels we should have, and climate came up as something that really we should talk about. And I said, well, okay, great. But the problem is that everything is fucked. So we end up with a solution where we all sit here and we all talk about the wonderful apps we create that help people with their own personal contributions, but we don't talk about political or social change or how developers can bring that about or use their own apps to try and bring that about to bring people together. Then we're doing very little. We're sort of tinkering around the edges or rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic, although the Titanic's going to be fine because there's no more icebergs left. So the point of this discussion is we have a couple of people here. It's a bit of a slimmed-down panel. We actually did ask for a few people from the political sphere to come and talk to us because when we talk about product owners, they're the ones that know the obstacles that are in the way. And I mean very specific, detailed obstacles. For example, planning issues with solar panels, stuff that might have inspired you to go away today and come up with something. And I thought that as it's such a slimmed-down panel, and as it seems we have quite a small group of people, we'll have a bit of a discussion. We'll have a bit of a brainstorm. So sort of see this maybe as a grooming session. We're coming up with ideas, we're grooming them, and next year we'll have a retro. We'll try and take these ideas away, we'll try and do something with it. Maybe even we'll have some form of volunteer group. I think green droid sounds like a nice word, green droid. And we can come up with a set of real actions so that we don't just end up today with a nice chat about how we're doing well for the climate and then next year have another nice chat about how we're doing well with the climate. So I'll ask the panel to introduce themselves. I've already mentioned my name. My interest is less so with the work I do at Nord Security with climate. I have a bit of history in activism. I was briefly elected in the UK. And I accidentally did really well with an app that I developed during the same-sex marriage campaign, where I threw together the most rickety PHP WordPress install to allow people to lobby the House of Lords. It's a famously undemocratic institution where they don't all have to have email addresses. We put it out there, didn't expect anything to happen, and in 2 weeks, 15,000 emails were sent, and the Lords themselves mentioned how they'd never been lobbied so hard in their lives, and what we thought would fail passed the House of Lords by 250 votes. So that gave me the impetus to realize that actually we can use tech to do good. And since then, we've unfortunately seen tech can be used to do bad in democracy. And I think it's got a bit of a bad rep. But if you look at Trump or Brexit or any of those situations where there's been interference, if tech can do bad for the political or social process, it must be able to do good. So my interest here is trying to help people get to that stage, trying to help developers who maybe aren't so political or aren't so engaged in activism to have an idea and to take that away. We have a great gift. For anybody else that has an idea for an app, they have to pay money. We can make apps that really should never be developed. And some of these apps should be developed. So with just a basic laptop and a bit of code, we can do some great things. So that's why I'm here, and I'll pass you over to Alex.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Alex. I'm just an ordinary software engineer, and I do this in a part-time employment state. So after a while, I started to do stuff with my life, and I ended up doing activism. So right now, I'm an animal rights and human rights activist, and occasionally, of course, also climate activism. Like maybe you have heard of Extinction Rebellion. There's a subgroup called Animal Rebellion. I'm active with. Sure.
No easy way of doing that, sorry.
And you all heard of Fridays for Future, of course. So my perspective is how to reach people and how to reach politics. And it's not always easy to know who to address. Because on the one hand, politics and economics have the power. They are the power holders. They are the one we can talk to make changes. But on the other side, in a democratic system and a free market system, the individuals also have great power. Like if we buy stuff, we tell the company to go on with this way. So it's always like a hard balance, and maybe apps and like developers can help like to organize all the stuff. Especially in activism, there's no organization platform. We really need stuff, and for me alone, it's too hard to develop one. I guess you know what I mean. So there's a lot of potential that we can do, but also like things like Climate does, like to really address the people, to motivate them. There's a great app I really want to mention. I do it right now. It's called Vegan Start, which really helps people to do something to impact like climate change, to avoid climate change. So there are many things we can discuss, I guess. I'm very excited what we will be talking about. So now I pass over to Markus.
Well, thank you so much. First of all, thanks for being for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here and talk about this. And I think what you alluded on is a really nice segue also to where I'm coming from or what we're trying to do with Klima. So my background originally is in political science and sociology. So that's what I'm by trade. I'm actually a sociologist. I have a lot of background in political activism as well. Right now I find myself as a co-founder of an app called Klima that talks more about what can every individual do. So it's another aspect of if you look at the system of kind of what needs to change, there's always the individual and the system that somehow need to interact, and they're both part of the equation. And so what Klima does, it's an app for every individual that wants to get involved and ask themselves, what's my role, what can I do to be part of the solution rather than part of the problem, and shows the individuals where they have power, as you said, in terms of their individual decisions. Starts with climate literacy, understanding the difference between high impact and low impact action. There's a lot of education that's still needed in our everyday lives. Ultimately, helping people make smart decisions to green their lives or make their lives less impactful when it comes to CO2 emissions. There's ways to offset your emissions as well by supporting climate projects every month. And a personalized guide to reduce your emissions. And we even have a political component as well, where you can write your representative and demand change as well from the political sphere. And so, yeah, very happy to be here and to discuss what we can do, where we need more tech to maybe link the individual and the collective or the political sphere. So, yeah, very excited to riff on this.
Wonderful, thank you so much. So I guess we can start with maybe one topic, and we can also cover the individual contribution as opposed to political change. But one thing I've always found quite strange, and obviously I know the reasons behind it, but perhaps you can sort of explain it as well, or both of you, is why is it so difficult, for example, for especially tenants in, say, Germany or any country to get solar panels on the top of their roofs? Why are we taking so long to do this? Once again, political change is a factor. But what can an individual do if they have what they want to improve their energy sources, but they don't have the financial means to do it? That's the big question I think most people ask when it comes to their contribution. So what can they do? And I think this might be a question that obviously has no one answer, but it might be something that we can take away today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, happy to start on this. When I kind of break it maybe down in two sections. So the one question is, what are the things that what are the things that I should address or that have the biggest impact? Obviously, green energy is one, and even before you put a solar panel on your roof, you can just switch to green energy provider, which is done in minutes online, right? If you haven't done that, so there's certain things that are have a very good ratio of effort to impact. But when it comes to solar panels, that's actually time and again there have been studies that showed that it's a lot about not so much about the big hurdles. You can do it, there's certain steps that you need to take, but it's more about finding the motivation to starting doing it. And what we see is that in regions, and Google has done a project where you can see that on Google Maps even, where it's shown that if you put a solar panel on your roof, you immediately increase the chance of your neighbor doing the same thing, because we are social animals, right? And so this is one reason also why individual action always matters much more than we think, because there's a ripple effect, and we might be able to, or quite literally, this is proven, we affect the lives and the decisions of people that we haven't even met, right? Because it's the neighbor of the neighbor, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot about, I think, normalizing climate-friendly behavior and making it the new norm and the new kind of commonsensical thing to do. And so yeah, so this is kind of one aspect maybe that I want to highlight. Yeah.
Wonderful. Alex, I know that you are particularly keen on animal welfare, and I myself became a vegetarian. I think it's actually nearly over my 5-year vegiversary. Is that a thing? But I'm only a vegetarian, so I'm still half evil. But I suppose this comes to my question is, when we're talking about the environment specifically, there is a danger that we sort of do shame each other, and whilst the sort of bigger people are sort of getting away with it. When in reality, I guess, if we apply these purity tests, what about people that just do 2 meat-free nights a week? Do we take this sort of slow approach in recommending that maybe people reduce their intake? Because as we know, there are very few things, and actually most people might not know, even more so than aviation, the meat and dairy industry produces more carbon. So what's your take on that?
Well, actually, Markus already said a good point to this. It's like much about individual change and inspiring people, rather than blame them not to do the stuff. For me, it's important that we really address the thing here. Animal welfare is a topic on its own, but it's often like the impact of the animal industry is often not addressed when we talk about climate change. And it's huge. You can look up this, you don't have to believe me, just make some research. There's something like when you focus on too little stuff, you might get distracted from the main problem. So as long as you're maybe facing a problem and you maybe not get vegan like the next day, but you maybe think of steps you can do, this is a great approach, I think. But maybe don't think you do a small step like I don't know, maybe, I don't have a good example right now.
I do, actually. I have one good example, because I remember after I became vegetarian, I had friends that were shaming other people for using plastic straws.
Yeah.
This was an example, actually, where I think we go a bit too far, because the plastic straws are actually quite important for disabled people, because those paper straws, they disintegrate in a few minutes if you're just me.
Yeah.
For somebody else, it's something that's quite needed. So they sort of, I've got a plastic straw, I'm Captain Planet, whilst they munch down on their Big Mac.
Yeah.
So I can see that's
it's so great example. Maybe another one is like the car driving the speed limit on the Autobahn. Well, I think there are many reasons for that we should do this. Don't get me wrong, I'm not speaking against it, but it's a percentage of like the whole private car part of the emissions, and this is only a small of the whole transportation emissions, and like all the animal industry is like the same amount as the whole transportation emissions, so more or less. So maybe we should not get lost in that and focus on the stuff. Avocados are a great thing. Like, avocados are often blamed for being a climate killer, like to have too much CO2, and actually that's true, but not compared to cheese. So or butter. So if you like to replace your cheese with avocados, and you don't do this because you heard avocados are bad, then you are just like on the wrong track. So to get back to the approach with like, we have to do stuff to motivate other people to do that. And of course, also the politics have to do some stuff. But in a democracy, we can't expect for the politicians to do something unless there is not a big interest group that will show this. An example of solar panels, it's like, why should politics do something if there is no interest in the public? Why should politics help people getting vegan if there are not people doing it? So yeah, that's something like a really big topic to get people to do stuff.
Wonderful. So I'd very much like to open this up to everybody else out here. And this is such a because the panel is so slim, I think we can make it reasonably informal. Normally, we would just say questions and sort of slap down anybody that starts with more of a comment, really. But feel free to give a comment. I'm interested to hear from those of you who have done any climate activism, who work in a company that sort of deals with, or at least has attempted to reduce the impact it has. Or in general, just any comments you may have in terms of what you've heard here so far or elsewhere, and how you feel that we ourselves can come together and maybe make something or a set of things that might be able to help. Is there anybody here that has anything they'd like to contribute? Not yet. Is it too early? I can see one. Yeah, please go ahead up to the microphone.
Hi.
Hey.
This is more of a question, actually.
Okay.
I noticed that as a developer, it's easy to come up with great ideas.
Yes.
Also find a development team to implement the technology side of stuff. But I've seen so many great projects fail because they couldn't get the marketing off the ground. So we are just like a bunch of developers doing cool stuff, and then you say, no users, right? So that's the problem. And do you have any tips of like getting these ideas that we as developers develop off the ground from a marketing kind of view? Because if you have a great technological solution for sustainability, it wouldn't matter if there are no users, right? So that's the gap that, or maybe do you have any ideas of how to find similar-minded people on the marketing side who join up with the tech side?
That's a really good question. And actually, I would almost sort of say, one of the things I failed to do whenever I've done apps in the past, the apps of mine that haven't done so well have been the ones where I've been so worried, actually, to begin with, about the branding and the image. So first of all, the first stage, I would take the marketing out of it. I would say, if you have a great idea that sort of grabs people and gives them an action that doesn't take too long to do, that's quite key. So signing a petition, these things get mocked all the time for their performative nature, but signing a petition, sending maybe a default template email to your local representatives. Once you've got this working, worry about how it looks and how it is. But then after that point, your question specifically about the marketing. So obviously, it helps to have some form of network. You want to speak to people who are involved in this issue specifically. You may want to speak to them beforehand because they're your product owners. Maybe you don't even know how you can help until you speak to them and find out what their needs are. Maybe they're activists and their biggest need is actually out in the street when they're being kettled by cops in a protest. You don't know yet. But it is having that sort of stream of activists. And from my experience, I found that what happened is we created something really, really simple that just asked a few people to do something. And that was picked up. Sometimes they don't get picked up. Sometimes your apps fail. That's just a fact. That got picked up by the media. There were various key figures. Stephen Fry tweeted it, which made our $2.99 a month hosting fall over pretty quickly when 6 million people tried accessing it at the same time. But that's sort of how it rolls over. But I really think the key is simplicity, knowing the community. I would add something else to it as well, actually. I know that it's laughed at and mocked at a lot, but gamification is a really, really good way of giving people some form of discrete target and goal. We found that when I released my really, really basic one just to get it working, a week later we found things were just dropping off a bit. So I just put a progress bar in there saying there are more people you can lobby. And when you give them that end point and you give them that sort of quick reward, they see the bar going up. That sort of helps as well. These are very, very, very specific examples. But I think marketing is almost an overarching thing over all these things, and you still need those things underneath. But the community is a really good way of doing it. And if it's a political change, your obvious people to speak to are politicians that have a following on social media. Do you have anything, either of you, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think you put it quite great with the community in general. My experience is that oftentimes you start with an idea, and this is not going to be the product at the end that people need, but it puts you on the right track, and then it's just all about getting feedback, talking to your users, and trying to understand really where you can solve a problem better than some other tool right now is solving it. And working from within a community, having a community that you're building with is the ideal way to do that. And then eventually, I think at one point is then just the question, if you have that sort of product market fit where you feel you have identified a problem and you have a solution that works for people, then it's a question of how far you want to take it. And generally, kind of, if a project then spins out into becoming a startup or a thing that you really want to kind of pursue not as a side hustle, but maybe as your main occupation, then I always like to say a good startup team needs a hacker, a hustler, and a hipster. And so you need you need a developer, of course, right? And you need somebody that has a general idea of business and marketing, and then somebody that's just a great designer to make it all look great and give it the jazz and the buzz. So this is normally the skill set that I recommend for something that you want to take beyond the side hustle once you have product market fit, or an idea that you're going in the right direction, and then building a team around it.
Well, I don't know if I can add that much to this. I've seen a lot of great apps like fail, like disappearing from the market again. Like it depends on which people you like to address. If you like to address activists or people who are like involved in something, then maybe a local cluster could help you. Like if there's a group like in your town that actually will use it, like you get in touch with them, then maybe the software is already worth it. Even if it's not a great success, maybe a couple of dozen people will actually use it, and from there, maybe it will spread, like Facebook did. But I'm not so into marketing, so that's all I can say for that.
That's okay. I think there's one more thing I would sort of add, and this is quite key, is everybody sort of thinks, and especially when we're developers at a conference and we see all these talks about how the right way of doing things is don't worry about being scrappy when you're developing something that's got to fix something. And especially when you're doing it in your spare time and not in your job, you can sort out the sort of technical details later. But if you're developing something that will be quite small, I think if you are looking at something that tries to solve everything, you're probably already on a path to failure, because you just can't if you're just one or two developers. Something quite small, but don't worry if it hangs together on rubbish basic hosting, if the API is written in PHP, or if the app doesn't have the right patterns, or don't worry about these things. Just get something that works first of all. That's the key thing. Everybody sort of starts with, how do I get this out there when they don't have the product ready? So get the product ready at its absolute base first, then worry about everything else. Wonderful. Has anybody else got anything they want to add? I can see some people sort of looking at each other, thinking, we're very nice, I promise I won't pick on you. There's one. Oh, okay, we have two. Amazing. Go ahead. Yeah.
Maybe just a question or a comment more from the consumer perspective, or really to somebody that is trying to learn about how to have a less impact with climate, with what we do, with what we consume. I think one part that it's really hard is just to sort out all the information that it's out there. You already mentioned it about straws, about avocado, and the more you read, the more you are aware, and I think that's important, but it's also really hard to know where can I really focus on. Should I use less my car, or should I have more of mindful eating, what I consume, what has the more impact, or what it's easy to fix? I don't know. I mean, I'm not affiliated with that app whatsoever. There's this Yuka app that tells you a little bit of what it's inside of what you're consuming. And I mean, it's nice, but then you spend half an hour scanning barcodes and try to see like, is this good? Is this bad? What are the options? What are the things that I can do? And it's just so overwhelming, the amount of information that we have out there, and the more you dig deep, the more you are like, okay, this is less carbon footprint, but maybe not social responsible with the people that are working on it. And I don't know, are there any ideas there or any advice, more really from a consumer part?
This seems like one for you.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's two ways of answering that. And the one is a shameless plug for where we have been building, because we're trying to solve exactly that. The topic is extremely complex. Like climate science is one of the most complex fields of science there is. And even if we break it down on an individual level, what's my individual impact? You have so many factors to focus on. So, for example, what we decided to focus on in Klima is to say we focus first and foremost on CO2 equivalent avoided from the atmosphere, because that's what we set out to say, simply what we set out to say to focus on, also based on what we believe is the biggest and most urgent problem of them all. And so, for example, what we do, we allow you to input personal data from your lifestyle, so we can assess where your emissions come from and what your personal carbon footprint is. And then we give you a list of action items that are based on the impact that an individual decision in your life could have, expressed in CO2 avoided. And then what I always recommend kind of from that list is to say, choose what feels that you're ready to do, right? Because there can be a top of the list is like stop eating meat, but for some people that is not so, it's an individual thing. For some people that's like, they know all the facts and know it's ethically the right thing to do, but they just have a hard time doing it. So pick something that works better for you. Start picking things that you can stick with. It's all about establishing new habits that you can stick with, because that's the only way to do sustainable change. And without judgment, take the next step. If you can't go vegan, then try, for example, the first thing that you can do is eat less beef, because beef is by far, has a far outsized footprint compared to chicken, for example. And it's already a big step to just say like, okay, that's one thing I can do, and then work your way at your own kind of speed and in your own journey kind of forward. And so this is something that we're trying to solve. But the second part of the question is just to find sources that help you get that to that level of climate literacy that we all need to get to. It is an important aspect for the next decade, the next 2 or 3 decades, that we get an intuitive understanding of what the carbon effects are of individual things that we do, and some examples have been given. I could easily add a lot more where people say like, that is mind-blowing, or how sometimes like 2 different actions that you can take feel equally accomplished or equally effortful, but are orders of magnitude different in terms of what the impact really is. So Klima is one app that tries to add that educational aspect as well. Obviously, the whole internet is full of it. Some is better sorted, some is more confusing, but I can just invite everybody to go on their journey, because ultimately, and again, kind of coming back to the question of judgment, which is sometimes also being put around. I think the most important thing, and what we're trying to do with Klima, is really not to point any fingers, not to judge anybody. Individuals are not responsible for the climate crisis, but they have power. So these are two very different things. And ultimately, we all need to change. Everything, the way we consume, the way we produce, everything needs to change right now. And Greta Thunberg said it quite poignantly, change will come whether you like it or not. Now, what we can decide is, do we want to be agents of that change, or do we want that change to happen and then we feel like it's happening to us? And so, and it all starts kind of from starting to engage with the topic, getting knowledgeable, and then finding where you want to be part of that change, or where you want to be an agent of that change in the area that you feel is the right for you to push something forward. And immediately you feel, not threatened, but you feel like you're designing your way through this, and I think that makes all the difference.
So yeah, I'd like to answer to the question too, because I feel you so much, and it's about the thing I talked about, like we are getting distracted so easily because there's so much to do, and it's really tough actually. And for me, it helped to have people around me that will help me find low-hanging fruits, like easy stuff, like getting tips. I'm not plastic-free, but I try to reduce it, and I try to find, like that works for me, like kind of gamification ways to do this, like a challenge for myself. Right now I take, I get the weight of my plastic trash and try to be below a limit, try to get the best high score, like the less plastic a month. Like such things, really, they are not hard. They are a little bit like fun. It's a serious topic, but it can be fun. It can be an enrichment for your life. And yeah, people help, but also like there are lots of organizations. If there is a thing that kind of bothers you, maybe you can follow Greenpeace. Maybe if the there's not only a climate issue, but also like the animals topic is a little bit like in your heart, then maybe just check out what PETA or other animal rights organizations will tell you. They have great tips. You can try a lot of things. Like the app I mentioned, it's Vegan Start. You actually can just try it for 30 days. And you don't have to, it's really important not to put yourself under pressure, because that way you won't do it. It's just too hard. If you, it's hard for me to say that because I'm an activist because of the animals. But if you are so unhappy not eating that steak, even it has such a big impact, then maybe do just other stuff and do that what you can't do. That just skip that if you can't do it, because otherwise you get burned out. And just don't think in like a consistent way. Like we tend to think, if I start stopping meat, then I will never eat meat again, and that feels so hard, and I don't want to do it, and so I do nothing. I go to McDonald's and grab a cheeseburger. But maybe just take the vegan options if they're there. I make examples. I don't know what your most topics are in, but as I'm a vegan, I just tell you stuff about veganism. Maybe just take the vegan options. Try as good as you can, as it feels right, and don't bother yourself with little things.
That's great. I think actually I'll go back to the marketing point earlier, because your question's given me an idea, which is we may have apps that help people be greener, but we don't have apps that market themselves as no judgment, that sort of say, you know, there is no harm in sort of maybe doing slightly less rather than being utterly amazing. And one of the things that I don't come from I wouldn't say I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth is probably the way I'd word it. I don't come from a very well-off background, is that it's all very easy for those of us now who have developer or manager salaries telling people to be greener, when actually for people who are in more disadvantaged situations, it's very difficult to do these things. So when it comes to meat or whatever, you know, finding vegetarian, vegan alternatives, people just don't have time, and you don't necessarily have time to learn or access to this information or the people that would sort of bring that to you. So maybe there's an argument there to sort of help people in an accessible way as much as possible. Then again, we come back to the social change element, which I think, and I'm sure maybe you'd agree, that it's far easier to be greener and more environmentally friendly if you have more of a disposable income. And people with, who are, what we can't expect is the single mother with 2 kids who works all day, gets home, and we sort of criticize her for not making something that's environmentally friendly. So we need some ways, or maybe an app that sort of helps people do a tiny bit better, and that might sort of help on that front as well. I think there was a second person who had, thank you for your question, by the way. I think there was a second person who had something.
Yes. Hello.
Hello.
So I wanted to ask, do you have any practical advice on how to make our daily life as developers greener? Like, I see behind you Bitrise. How do I find out if Bitrise is greener than CircleCI or something else? Do you have any suggestion on that? Since also, Markus, you have a company, Chris also, so both of you? No, 3 of you. And also, Alex mentioned you are kind of missing platforms on your daily activism. How do we help? Like, you need developers. Maybe you also do your shameless plug on that.
Yeah, so maybe, so this, those are 2 questions, right? Like the first one is how to check if something is green. I will pass that to you. I will just answer for the activism platform thing. That actually, if there are people here who are interested in doing something like that, I really like to get in touch. So just come to me, and we can see what we are doing. Chris already said, maybe we can, what was the name? Green Droid? I like
Green Droid. I think that's a good idea. Yeah.
Maybe we could start like a project group, actually. Brainstorming, doing stuff, could be fun. And starting developing stuff, maybe not only an activism platform. There's a lot of things we could do. So I would love that if we could do this. So for the first part of the question, maybe Markus, do you?
Yeah, would be better now if our CTO would be sitting here for that specific question, but I can share what I as far as my knowledge goes. So what we do, for example, well, first of all, whatever the electricity you use, go for a green energy provider if you haven't done so. This is a very simple thing to do. For the cloud hosting, it's not super easy to make everything green, and sometimes it's not possible depending on the provider that you use, and there's not necessarily so many great alternatives. And we are, for example, using AWS for cloud hosting, and they have a specific server location that is run on green energy, and then you can decide to shift your computation to that. So this is kind of how to address some of the things, and that's kind of what I can share from the back of my mind. But also when we talk about high impact versus low impact action, I would generally say that obviously here everybody in the tech community is thinking about how can I make my tech on my app completely green, but it might still be kind of, if we zoom out and look at society as a whole, we really need to talk about the big industries. We need to talk about transportation. We need to talk about how we produce food. It's really that computation is not a big contributor to global warming. It's actually a fairly kind of low impact part of the whole equation. And I can also use that as to debunk some studies that have been floating around since a couple of years, are still quoted today, but have been long debunked by like orders of magnitude also. So and we do that sometimes when we do workshops to give a little bit of a feeling for people what's high impact, low impact action. So there's a law that's called Comey's law. It means that the energy needed for certain computational tasks is halved every 1.6 years. That means any study that you might read about like how energy intensive it is to do certain computational tasks that's like 10 years old is so outdated. And so the amount of computation needs that we have is increasing at a very slower pace than the pace at which this becomes more and more energy efficient, and then also being used to move to green energy. So just to give one example for that from a consumer point of view, because that's what I know. If you were to stream Netflix or any other video service, because that's also often talked about, the big carbon footprint of our Netflix consumption or whatever it is. If you were to stream Netflix 8 hours a day, 365 days a year, so every day of the year, the carbon footprint resulting from that is equal to an afternoon ride with your car, 45 minutes each direction. So this is kind of sometimes the things that we need to put into perspective. So I think when we talk today, or when we talk in general about like how can we use coding to become a contributor to the solution, let's not just look at our own navels, but what we can do with code in larger society.
Yeah, I think you caught me out there asking me what I know about my company, and the answer is I don't. I've not been there very long, but I should have asked. But I think that sort of has a greater point, which is we do have the ability to sort of ask our workplaces what they are doing, not maybe just to reduce their input, but also what they're doing actively to help. And I think there are other things that sort of come from that as well, which is that it's very fashionable to be green at the moment. And as such, you'll end up with a lot of advertisements from individual companies about how they are green. And I won't sort of name the expo because I don't want to get sued, or the companies, but there is an expo, a green expo, coming up in a certain European city soon. And I only know about it because I was looking for panelists for this panel. And I noticed that it was sponsored by various oil companies, and you sort of think, well, sure, but they also have a huge lobbying budget by which they go against pretty much anything that helps. So you'll end up with situations where the marketing says things are green, but the result does not, and that comes back to the political change. In order to force people to be, force companies, to be greener, you have to make them be transparent, and you have to make them maybe publish exactly what impact they are having on the environment, because it's quite easy to do a graphic saying, look how green we are, and then have the fine print at the bottom. But we need something in place, whichever country that you happen to live in, that makes sure that these people are held accountable for the promises they make and the things they say that they do. And I noticed, so there was another question about the activism, which sort of brings me, I think, to another point, which is the other day I walked past, I think I was talking about this, the Letzte Generation collective, their hands glued to the ground, Innsbrucker Platz. I used to be sort of quite a moderate sort of centre-left liberal, and I find myself becoming more radical as time goes on, so I just marched up to them in front of all the cops and just said, good for you, and I felt like I'd achieved something when actually they're the ones that are in trouble. But what I felt after that is what can we do to help? I mean, and it's a controversial topic, civil disobedience, but name one cause in the world, in the history, or at least in recent history, where things have been achieved against great resistance that didn't have some form of civil disobedience, and sometimes even worse. So the question is what, I guess it's open to anybody. How do we help? First of all, I think we do. And secondly, how can we help? And what are the ethical and moral boundaries of doing something that might be helping someone do something that is illegal, but for the greater good? I think this might be one for you, Alex.
Yeah. I just watched a video yesterday about some guys I actually know that did that stuff you're talking about, also from Letzte Generation. They did it in Munich. And yeah, they made a great video about that. Well, I think they can use support. So maybe if you are really motivated to do something about climate change, maybe get in touch with them and actually help them. But the thing you did is a pretty nice thing. I was active with Extinction Rebellion, and even if if people walking by show that this is a good thing, they show their understanding, it's really huge mental support for the activists. It's not an easy thing to get on a road and glue yourself on the street. I never did it because that was too much for me. I just sat there and waited for the police to drag me away. They never did, actually. But even that one was really hard. So show your support. Maybe talk to the other people. You are not one of them if you're just passing by. You can calm down the other people. You can say, this is for a greater good. This is important right now because politics are just not listening. So, as you said, this is a part of change. We need radicals, even if you don't like them because you are blocked and want to get to work. Even if you think it's too extreme, it helps to get the more the easy demands getting more into the middle of society. Because right now, if you're talking about green stuff, it's very popular. This is also because there are radicals that help shifting the point of view of all this. Maybe you remember a time where it was extreme to be vegetarian. It's no longer vegetarian. It's just typical. No, as long as you're not vegan, everything is fine. So actually, this helps. It helps to shift. And this is something important.
Well, thank you for your kind words. But I still feel like the person drinking from a plastic straw, from a paper straw at McDonald's. But I guess I almost want to steer the conversation a bit more to what developers can do to help people, because there are some situations where they'll be facing legal problems. They'll be facing, coordination problems. If we're just assuming that maybe it is morally correct, I mean, I think it is morally correct to help people out, even in situations of civil disobedience, when you have this situation where they are campaigning for a greater good, especially something so existential as the future of the planet. So it's a question, I guess, of what can we do to help? Maybe it would be great to have them here to discuss that.
That leads back to the activism platform for me right now. That's my only idea, because right now we're using, the people are organized in Signal groups because they trust Signal. And if you ever try to organize something in a WhatsApp group or a Signal group, you know how hard this is. On the not so extreme side, we're using Discord because it's much more organized, but we need a trusted platform to do this. This is something we could do as developers, I think. And of course, help. Maybe you're in a big company. Maybe you can talk to your bosses, and maybe they can do a public post about this. This will also help, of course.
Maybe just one thought to add. I think it's absolutely, these acts of civil disobedience are extremely admirable and important, but I think sometimes the problem is that the intention doesn't entirely translate into wider society or parts of society. And maybe this is something where we can think about how can we be translators of this, because ultimately the message is, correct me if I'm misquoting this principle of Extinction Rebellion, act as if the truth is real, I'm saying, or something along these lines. So essentially, essentially what they are doing is like, we are just consequently acting in the way that acknowledges how dire the situation is. And each and every one of you, if you had that acknowledgement in your head right now, you would act just as drastically, because this is normally what the situation demands. And nobody's understanding this, and this is why we act in the way that is on par with what we're up against as humanity. And oftentimes that translation is, I think, or that understanding or that message, then through tabloid media, it's just like, oh, some radicals are blocking you to go to work. And then people get angry, and then sometimes I think it can even lead to lack of understanding. And so what all of us can do, and obviously in person if we're there, but also online, and maybe even organize certain kind of digital ways to say, okay, everybody right now, this is happening, go on social media and spread that message. These people are doing what we all should be doing if we understand what we're up against. And so maybe there's some way that technology can help us coordinate in conjunction with these actions to help kind of spread that message in wider social media landscape.
It's all about familiarity, isn't it? I mean, people, I've always found it quite strange how in Germany, when fuel protesters block roads, people sort of go, yeah, good for you, but when climate protesters do it, they are subject to the most incredible hate and disagreement. And I think you're right, it's all about this concept of the Overton window, which is people look at these protesters and these protesters and they ask themselves which one is more like me. So we almost need to sort of try and drag people to that familiarity and sort of help them understand why this is happening. And I think there are very good examples of where this is done, it's been done quite well. Greta, for example, has done very well in it, but has also come up against a huge amount of acid from various people. And we also have to fight from a very well-funded industry that don't want change. And I think, I can't remember which company it was, once again, not going to name because I don't want to be sued, but there was apparently a budget they had for spreading that sort of misinformation among pro-climate groups in order to try and get them to fight amongst each other so that they would be able to sort of deal with this. So thank you very much for that. That's very useful. So there's another app idea, is to try and bring people closer to what may seem to anybody else like extremism when it's really just saving the planet. Does anybody else have anything they want to add? Microphone time. We have one over here. Yep.
I would love to hear thoughts about sustainability and the right to repair. Just to shift a bit the discussion to that, because we are technicians and perhaps we can give our knowledge to others to repair technical stuff. I was, some weeks ago, I repaired a speaker and I was so happy that it was functional again, and sometimes it helps to give others the knowledge to repair stuff, keep it longer, and be more sustainable. So I would love to hear your thoughts about it.
A very great question. Technical waste forming one of the biggest problems that we have, and obviously we have a lot of discussion fairly recently with Apple and the chargers. And I remember when mobiles first became a thing and everyone started having them, and I think I still have 10 different chargers at home from old phones that I can't bring myself to throw away. And so I guess, what do we do with these, ignore the chargers, but how do we help people maybe repair or reuse or recycle their goods rather than just throw them away when they get too old? Because we go through phones, we go through speakers, we go through various other things very quickly. Do you have anything to add on that?
I think there's a couple of dimensions on this, and one of them certainly is regulation, and the EU just passed for the chargers a regulation that's all going to be USB-C, if I'm not mistaken, in the future. So this is something where, like, really it's politicians' job to do that, and the right to repair is certainly something that is hard to force on company any other way than through regulation, because from just consumer demand, I can go 1,000 times to an Apple store or whatever, or an Android store, and ask people to repair my phone. As long as I'm still going to be buy the new one when I can't repair the old one, that's the voice that, with my wallet, that actually counts at the end of the day. So this is something that I think politics is actually really, really good to address it on that level. But there's a different aspect also to obsolescence, not only obsolescence through things breaking, but also perceived obsolescence. So, and this is something where, again, we can all be a part of resisting the idea that it's cool to have always the latest device, even the old one is still working, or to have always the latest fashion. I mean, the fashion industry is predicated on this idea that I need something new quickly. And going back into seeing the value on picking a quality item that I really like, this one sweater that I can wear for 10 years because I just love it, and it saves me time, it saves me money, it gets me out of this whole kind of messy system of throwing things away, and it's more kind of a more mindful approach towards consumption in general, which is probably good for all of our mental health. So just to kind of shift the conversation of what's cool and kind of how we should approach consumption from that perspective is something that we can, I think, all be part of.
There's some concept in, I guess, many cities. It's called Repair Cafe, and it's a place where you can go and get your stuff repaired by people who know about it. It's probably hard with a mobile phone anyway, but I'd love to see an app that connects those stores, those cafes, or even better, maybe something like Vinted. You just can send somebody your stuff and she repairs it for you. This would be something great, and I went to a talk on Javaland this year, also about green coding, and I guess the speaker was Tim Schade, and he really empathizes that we have to design our apps for old hardware. It's really important that we do not just rely on the newest APIs and just think, yeah, it's okay, people buy a new phone anyway. If the app works well on an old phone, and many people do this, then people don't throw their phones away that fast. It's easy.
So as we've spent almost an entire hour talking about how we bring people together as developers, I thought, well, it seems really silly if we just go away and don't bring everybody in this room together if you're interested in doing more. So I have created a Telegram group. I'm not normally good at multitasking, whilst everybody was answering, and I have put the link. This is please, I don't know where else to put it. This is not self-publicizing, so don't follow me if you think it is. But if you go to @ChristopherWard, it's the latest tweet under my pinned tweet, and there is a link to a Telegram group if you are interested in maybe doing more, or if you felt like you couldn't necessarily contribute here, because it's it can be intimidating to talk in front of a small panel in a small audience. But I will sort of ask. We have another 8 minutes. Does anybody have anything else they might want to add or say that hasn't been covered yet? One more. Yep.
It's more of a comment. We are speaking about how we can help and how we can do things for other people. And I heard our colleague here speaking about having a great idea. And from my experience, sometimes the best idea will come from the people around you. Like we're talking about helping people. Best thing you can do if you want to help people is finding something that you really love, like a niche that you like, and talk to the people that are there. And try to find something that they need so you can help them.
I think that's a very good point, and that's what sort of I was saying about earlier about the product owner idea, is that the people that may need an app or some sort of technological solution more than anybody else are people that have a problem we don't even know about. So it is important to sort of get involved in these groups and find that niche. I think that's a really, really nice point to make. Is there anything you want to say on closing before we go? Any final last words, either of you?
Nothing but to say thank you for the amazing participation and questions and suggestions. It was just fun to be here, and I think at the end of the day, it's up to identifying what is the lever that you personally have. And so as coders, as developers, technology is the thing to think about. As individuals, there's always something we can do. As entrepreneurs, there's maybe an entrepreneurial route that we can take to provide the biggest lever to become part of the solution.
So for me, a network is very important. Like to connect to people, even just for ideas, like to share ideas, to help them maybe in stuff that some people are already good in. And yeah, so my final thoughts would be like, maybe if some of you want to connect, just come to me, come to us. I will be here, like I guess, for the next talk and a little bit after that. So you will find me. And especially if you need any help with veganism, just come to me. Really, I do this regularly to talk to people, and actually, it's not so hard as you might think. So thank you for listening, for being here, for being interested. Means a lot to me.
I guess then my final word and the advice I'd give to any developer that's ever wanting to do something good in the world is remember that sort of skill that you have that's really, really sought after. And there's a reason that, the tech industry has attracted so much money and interest in many years because people understand the power that it has. So do remember that just with your laptop and just with a few lines of code, you can make some real difference. So if you have an idea, do try it out. Don't be afraid to try. Don't be afraid to knock together something rubbish. I think you might end up being surprised at the difference that it can make. So I just want to thank Markus and Alex for taking the time to come here today to talk to you all, and thank you all for being here so early on the last day of conference to listen and to contribute. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your community day at DroidCon. Thank you so much.